Well, good morning to you. Thanks for logging on and getting onto this lesson. It's a lesson which is something I've added into the scheme of work myself because it builds really nicely on the themes which have started to develop through the protest poetry, and particularly the idea of the Black Lives Matter. This lesson starts to bring those ideas to a close to some extent, because I don't want to over-focus on the matter and make it just about one thing, but it has been really important over the last year to see this. So anyway, I'm going to talk you through. So as per my previous lessons, make sure you pause this video when I tell you to pause it, have a go at the activities, and then we move on together. And by doing that, hopefully it will support you much better. So with that idea in mind then, task number one then please, is, I'll give you a title in a moment, but task number one, get ready to pause this video. Simply, could you write down a definition of racism, please? And then once you've had a go at that, explain your thoughts. Do you think racism has been defeated in the UK? So I'm going to go quiet for 5 seconds. The task's on the board. Pause the video. Have a go, Year 9. And that noise you might just about make out on the back of my thing is the washing machine having a go this morning. Right, now what you might need to do is log on, go onto the internet and have a look at an actual definition of racism yourself. I imagine you were very close, of course, but has it been defeated in the UK? Well, I imagine the answer to that question is almost certainly not. Although we are a country which certainly strives and fights for equal rights, it's certainly not true to say that there isn't discrimination still built into our society in certain places. So yeah, many of us coming from a certain background may not see that. Anyway, moving on with that. Number 2 then, so there's your title right there at the top. So if you need to pause in a moment, do so and write down that title and today's date on your work, please. And then you'll have to access the links for these through Show My Homework. They are on the slides I'm uploading there for you. But I need you to watch these 2 videos. Now, it's really, really important you watch these because otherwise when we look at the poem in a minute, it just won't almost mean anything to you. This is an event in recent history which I reckon that most of you won't know about. Many of you won't have heard of the name Stephen Lawrence, and yet it's so important that you know about who he was and what happened to him. So I'm asking you to, as it says there, task 2, watch the 2 videos and then summarise by completing number 1 and number 2 there. 1, what happened to Stephen Lawrence in your words? And this is more than just a couple of words or a single sentence answer. I'm looking for 2, 3, 4 sentences there, please. And number 2, what was/is the problem with the UK police then? So once you've watched those videos, summarise that for me, and that's what I'll be looking for when I look at your work later to see your understanding of this. So get ready to pause this video then and open up those links and have a go. Over to you. Right. Thanks for having a good go at that. So hopefully you've learned something about Stephen Lawrence there that you wouldn't have known before, and just the brutality of what happened to him, but also then the cover-up almost, or the lack of care that was shown by the police. And it led to some real changes in the police, as you might have seen there. The phrase institutional racism had never really come about before. Racism, hopefully a word you're familiar with. Institutional, as in built into an institution. Institutions like the police, the NHS, the government. These are examples of institutions, big organisations, if you like, really. And institutional racism was just the idea that it was there from top to bottom. It just happened and no one was challenging it. And it has led some real changes across the country. Things are definitely not perfect by any means, but I won't have time really to go into that now on this video. But yeah, if you're ever interested in these sorts of things, I know some of you really are curious, look it up. Google institutional racism. Right. Introducing you to this man. This is Benjamin Zephaniah, is how you pronounce his surname. Fantastic writer, British writer, born in this country to parents from the Caribbean, however. He had a very challenging upbringing. He's dyslexic. He is a writer, by the way, I should say now. He's a writer, fantastic writer, but he is dyslexic. Also, he left school unable to read or write, went into a career of petty criminalism, burglary and that sort of thing, but got through that and is now recognised as a really fantastic writer. And we're going to have a look at one of his poems today and treat it as an unseen poem. It's not one which is in your protest poetry anthology, however. So this is one you're going to have to look at on the screen today. Just going to introduce you to one book as well, which I really, really recommend by him. If you're currently not reading anything, and I know that some of you won't be, if you're able to get hold of a copy of Refugee Boy, I can promise you won't be disappointed with it. It's a really emotionally gripping book is what I shall say. Right, moving on then. So there's Benjamin Zephaniah, the guy that we are reading his work today. And here it is. I'm going to read through this with you and then ask you to pause it in a minute. Now it says highlighting anything that leaps out at you in that box, which you won't able to physically be able to do, but I'll be asking you to see what leaps out as we read through it. So here we go. Extract from what Stephen Lawrence has taught us. And as I say, it's an extract. This is part of a much longer poem which he wrote about, as you can see, the death of Stephen Lawrence. So here we go. We know who the killers are. We have watched them strut before us, as proud as sick Mussolinis. We have watched them strut before us, compassionless and arrogant. They paraded before us, like angels of death, protected by the law. It is now an open secret. Black people do not have chips on their shoulders. They have injustice on their backs and justice on their minds. And now we know that the road to liberty is as long as the road from slavery. The death of Stephen Lawrence has taught us to love each other and never to take the tedious task of waiting for a bus for granted. Watching his parents, watching the cover-up, begs the question. What are the trading standards here? Why are we paying for a police force that will not work for us? The death of Stephen Lawrence has taught us that we cannot let the illusion of freedom endow us with a false sense of security as we walk the streets. I'm going to go quiet for 5 seconds in a moment. In that 5 seconds, I ask you to pause this video, have a look at this poem yourself, and just decide. So you're going to need to reread it. Decide which lines leap out at you, please. And then in a moment, I'll reveal what I decided leapt out at me, and we'll see if we agree. So here we go. Pause this video now, please. Right, as always with poetry, there'll be different interpretations, but let's see if we have anything in common with what we decided. And there we go. For me, there's like lots of repetition here, like we at the top there, making you feel like you're part of that community, that we are involved in this situation moving forward, that we're not just an observer just watching somebody else go through something. You got the simile in that first stanza there, as proud as sick Mussolinis. If you don't know who Mussolini, look him up, but he's a dictator. You've got the words like killers and the repetition of strut. It almost shows how angry he feels about the way they were strutting into court, and you would have seen that in the video. Then in that first stanza still, like angels of death, similarly protected by the law, as in the police on the side of the people from a different background. Open secret injustice on that second stanza. I'm looking at the repetition of and, like building up. The road to liberty, like to the idea of freedom, is as long as the road from slavery. You've got some nice comparisons, almost juxtaposing two things in that stanza there. And if I then move over to that right-hand side stanza, watching his parents, watching the cover-up, that repetition, like we're watching them, watching it. And the cover-up just blatantly says what he thinks it was, the investigation, which wasn't really an investigation. There are questions being asked there, rhetorical questions. And then this last line, that illusion of freedom that I've highlighted there, really important. So moving through with this then. Look at the title and its connotations. Can we work out the message of this poem? Well, extract from what Stephen Lawrence has taught us. Message of the poem. Okay, so we need to learn lessons from what's happened to this poor boy who was murdered. That's what I'd probably say about it. Connotations, taught, maybe, is a key word there, that we need to learn lessons, perhaps, is a significant word, the word taught. But moving on again, 3 choices. So if you had this poem in front of you, which you don't, I'm not going to ask you to do this task today, but I want you just to listen to me talking you through it. And the choices of line and what the methods are, well, I've gone through some of those as well. We've had the simile, we've had the juxtaposition, we've had the strong language as well. There's also the repetition and the effects of those. Well, that's the key bit there, is what you would use is then to answer an unseen question. Now, I'm going to do something slightly different to what it says on the screen here. Instead of that, the final task which I want you to have a go at, but don't switch this video off yet because I've got one more thing to say at the end, is the questions which you see here, which link to the Viper's Cave skills. So you've got a retrieval question there. How does the poet describe the killers in stanza 1? So quite simply, that's a short answer. Vocabulary, I'm looking for you to explain what the phrase a chip on your shoulder actually means. If you don't know, then look it up, but I hope you've heard of it before. I've got a pair of inference questions next. How does the poet feel about the killing of Stephen Lawrence? You may need to reread the poem a little bit to be able to answer that one. And infer, what does the poet think the killing showed us about Britain? So again, that isn't explicitly mentioned in the poem. I'm looking for you to work out what you think he would feel based on how he's written that poem. Those two, definitely more than one sentence answers, looking for maybe 2 sentences there, explaining your thoughts a little bit. And with number 5, analyse. What method does the poet use to show his feelings about the murder of Stephen Lawrence? So I've gone through a few of those already. So I'm looking for you not for question 5 just to write a simile. I'm looking for you to say he uses a simile, and that simile explores, suggests, illustrates, and you're basically doing a little bit of analysis there. So that number 5 needs to be 2 or 3 sentences at least, really. And I have put some sentence starters down there for number 5 for you to follow. Now, just before I end this bit of video and let you have a go at that task number 3, what I have here is just a photo of one of the statues which I featured in a recent live lesson for you. This is a man in London. He was in London Docklands. His statue was outside a museum, and he was a sort of a slave trader and owner. And just again, history changing. Perhaps we've got the dominant white male starting to disappear from history a little bit, and we're starting to explore history more broadly, perhaps it's fair to say. But anyway, end with that image and say thanks very much for watching this one all the way through. I hope it's been useful. As always, send a photo of your work when you're finished, and hope to see you soon. Bye bye.